Part of a wide plain surrounded by low hills and red earth paths to the settlement known as Ioto. Travelers passed it often, yet few stayed long. From a distance, Ioto appeared like any other village. Clay huts rested shoulder to shoulder. Smoke rose gently from cooking fires each morning. Children laughed, goats wandered freely, and elders gathered beneath an ancient Iroko tree to speak of seasons long gone. But Ioto carried a secret that set it apart from every other place. In Ioto, no man had hair. From birth to old age, every female head remained smooth and bare. No braids. No curls. No strands to comb. It had been so for generations beyond counting. The people no longer questioned it. Baldness was tradition. Baldness was destiny. Mothers raised bald daughters. Grandmothers died bald. Songs were sung about many things, but never about hair. Then, on a night when rain fell softly and drums rested silent, something impossible happened. A baby girl was born with hair. The midwives froze. One dropped the cloth she held. Another cried out to the spirits in fear. Upon the child's head lay thick dark strands, soft and alive, glistening beneath the oil lamp. No one dared touch her at first. The hut filled with whispers and trembling breaths. The child wailed loudly, unaware that her existence had already broken an ancient rule. Her name was Amora, before dawn came. Sorrow followed wonder. Amora's mother, weakened by labor, never rose again. Her breath faded quietly, leaving the baby crying beside a lifeless body. By sunset the following week, Amora's father also fell ill. He spoke little, stared often at his child, and died before the moon completed its cycle. 2 deaths. 1 miracle. Fear wrapped itself tightly around Ioto. By custom, the orphan child was given to her nearest kin, her aunt Monola, a stern woman known for her sharp tongue and strict ways. Monola had a daughter of her own named Sila, bald like every girl before her. When Amora entered that household, something twisted inside Monola's heart. As the child grew, so did her hair. It spilled down her back like woven silk. It caught sunlight and moonlight alike. When she fetched water, reflections danced upon her head. When she bent to sweep the compound, dust clung everywhere except to her shining hair. The villagers noticed. Some smiled. Some stared too long. Some looked away, unsettled. "You are blessed," a woman once whispered to her. Others said nothing, but envy speaks loudly even in silence. Monola watched every moment. Each night she saw Amara gently parting her hair with wooden combs. Each morning she saw her own daughter Sila tracing her bare scalp with small fingers. Comparison poisoned the air within that hut. Love never grew there, yet Amora remained kind. She rose before sunrise. She carried firewood. She spoke softly. She obeyed without complaint. She never boasted. Her beauty rested not only on her head but in her patience. The elders admired her. The children followed her. The village began to speak her name with expectation. Then the seer of Ioto summoned everyone to the sacred clearing. The old woman stood tall despite her age, leaning on a staff carved with symbols older than memory. Her voice cut through the crowd like iron. "The wrong of the past will be undone," she declared. "What was taken will return. The bearer of the lost sign shall rise. Through her, freedom will come." Mama spread quickly. The girl with hair, the seer said clearly. She is the key. All eyes turned. Amora's knees weakened. Monola stiffened. The past was remembered openly that day. Long ago, a grieving widow had been accused falsely. Her head was shaved in shame. She was beaten and chased away. As she left, humiliated and broken, she cursed the women of Ioto. From that day, hair never returned. Now Amora stood as hope. And hope, to the fearful, looked like danger. Praise followed her everywhere. Plans were whispered. Futures imagined. Monola listened, and hatred rooted itself deeply. If Amara fell, the prophecy would die. That truth became Monola's obsession. One evening, she acted. Amora returned weary from the stream. Monola offered her a calabash of drink with a smile too smooth to trust. Amara drank. Darkness followed swiftly. When she woke, pain greeted her. Stones struck her skin. Voices roared accusations. She lay surrounded by faces twisted with rage, disgrace. Shame. She has ruined us. Amora cried out in confusion. She remembered nothing. Her clothes were untouched. Her hands were empty. Yet they shouted of a man beside her. Of broken purity. Of lies carefully planted. Monola arrived, feigning shock, sealing Amora's fate with cruel words. Judgment came fast. Shave her, Monola commanded. Let her be like us. Terror consumed Amora. She begged.
No!
She
Stop!
screamed.
Please! It hurts!
She swore innocence. But hands held her down. A blade kissed her scalp. Her hair fell like dying leaves. With each cut, something inside her shattered. When it ended, Amora lay broken, bald, and silent, and Ioto believed the curse had won again. Silence became Amora's closest companion after that night. The village of Ioto, once alive with laughter and movement, now felt like a place carved from stone. No one greeted her anymore. Paths she once walked freely suddenly emptied when she appeared. Children who once followed her steps now pointed and whispered behind trembling fingers. Women turned their backs, as if shame were contagious. Men looked at her with cold judgment, their eyes heavy with disappointment and belief in lies they had not witnessed. Amora remained inside the hut for many days. She no longer rose early. She no longer sang while sweeping. She sat quietly on a mat near the wall, her knees pulled to her chest. Her hands often resting on her bare head, as if she were still trying to understand the absence. At night, sleep avoided her. Each time she closed her eyes, she felt the blade again, cold and unforgiving. She heard her own screams echo in her ears. She remembered her aunt's grip, firm and merciless. The betrayal hurt deeper than the humiliation. Monola, on the other hand, slept well. Each morning, she stepped out of the hut with her chin raised, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She watched Amara from a distance, bored and broken, and felt a strange satisfaction settle inside her. The village spoke no more of queens or prophecies. The future felt safe again. Her daughter Celia walked beside her. Silent and observant, sensing that something had changed, though she did not yet understand what it meant. Days stretched into weeks, then something strange happened. One quiet morning, as Amora sat alone, she absent-mindedly rubbed her scalp. Her fingers paused. She rubbed again. There was something unfamiliar beneath her skin. Something rough. She leaned closer to the small clay mirror hanging on the wall. Her heart skipped. Tiny black dots dotted her head like seeds breaking through soil. Hair, at first, she thought it was her imagination. She touched again, carefully this time. The sensation was real. By the next morning, the dots were clearer. By the third day, soft strands had begun to rise. Amora said nothing. She kept her head covered when she stepped outside. But villagers notice everything. Whispers began. How is her hair growing? He was shaved for immorality. She should be bald forever. Fear crept quietly through Ioto. The elders gathered beneath the Iroko tree more often. The women touched their own smooth heads with uneasy hands. Some remembered old stories their grandmothers once whispered by firelight, stories of truth hidden within curses, stories of hair that returned only to the innocent. Monola noticed too. Her nights grew restless. Her dreams filled with blades turning against her, with hair sprouting uncontrollably from the earth, wrapping around her feet. She began avoiding Amora's gaze. When villagers looked at her too closely, her chest tightened. The satisfaction she once felt cuddled into dread. One afternoon, the village messenger arrived, breathless and pale. The king has heard, he announced. All involved are summoned to the palace. The words struck Ioto like thunder. Guards arrived before sunrise the next day. They did not shout. They did not threaten. Their silence was heavier than anger. Monola, Sila, the woman who held Amara down, and Amora herself were taken beyond the hills to the royal compound. The palace loomed large and unforgiving. Inside the great hall, the king sat tall, his expression carved from stone. Elders lined the walls. The seers stood quietly beside the throne. One by one, they spoke. Amora told her story with trembling lips but steady truth. She spoke of the drink, the darkness, the waking terror, the false accusations. She did not shout. She did not beg. She simply spoke. Then the king gestured, and the guards brought forth a man, bound and shaking. His eyes darted wildly. Sweat poured down his face, he confessed. He spoke of coins pressed into his palm by Monola. Of promises made. Of lies rehearsed. Of being told to lie beside an unconscious girl and vanish before dawn. His voice cracked under the weight of his own shame. The hall fell silent. Monola collapsed to her knees. Words deserted her. The truth stood naked and undeniable. Justice followed swiftly. Amara was cleared. Her name restored. Her dignity returned. Monola and her daughter were sentenced to labor beneath the sun, carrying water and firewood for the very celebration they tried to destroy. As Amora stepped out of the palace, sunlight touched her head. Her hair, now growing freely, caught the light once more, and Ioto held its breath, knowing the final reckoning had not yet come. The day Ioto woke to celebration felt unlike any morning before it. Drums echoed from the palace hill, rolling across the plains like thunder softened by joy. Women stepped out of their huts early, touching their heads in disbelief as tiny strands of hair brushed their palms. Laughter and tears mixed freely, for something long stolen was finally returning. The curse that had shaped their lives, their customs, and their fears was loosening its grip. Amora stood quietly within the palace courtyard, dressed in woven royal cloth the color of sunrise. Her hair had grown thick and full once more, flowing freely down her back. It was no longer just a symbol of difference. It was proof. Proof that truth could survive humiliation. Proof that innocence could outgrow cruelty. As attendants moved around her, she felt calm, not prideful. Her heart carried scars, but it also carried peace. Beyond the palace walls, Monola bent under the weight of a water pot. Sweat soaked her wrapper. Her hands trembled from labor she had never known. Beside her, Sila struggled in silence, her youthful strength tested daily. They heard the drums. They heard the laughter. With every sound, regret tightened its hold. They had tried to bury another's destiny and uncover their own shame instead. When the procession began, the village gathered along the paths. No one shouted. No one mocked. They watched as Amara walked beside the prince. Her step steady, her head held high. The elders bowed. Mothers clutched their daughters close. Some villagers wept openly. Others lowered their eyes, remembering stones thrown, blades lifted, silence chosen when courage was needed most. At the throne, the king spoke words that sealed history. He named Amara queen, not because of her hair alone, but because of her endurance, her truth, and her refusal to become bitter. As the blessing was spoken, a hush fell. Then, slowly, a gasp rose from the crowd. Women touched their heads again. The hair was no longer imagined. It was real. The curse was broken, joy spilled into every corner of Ioto. Children danced. Songs were reborn. Fires burned late into the night as stories changed from sorrow to hope. For the first time in generations, mothers braided their daughters' hair by moonlight, laughing as if rediscovering themselves. Amora did not celebrate alone. She looked upon the people with compassion. She remembered every tear, every stone, every plea unheard. Yet she chose forgiveness. Justice had been served. Hatred had no home in her reign. Monola and Sila were not cast away. Their punishment remained, but it was paired with humility, not vengeance. Years passed. And Ioto transformed. Hair grew freely. Fear loosened its hold. The old curse became a lesson told by elders, not a shadow lived by children. Under Amora's rule, the village learned a deeper truth, that envy blinds, lies poison, and silence enables cruelty, but truth, no matter how buried, will rise. One evening, Amora stood on the palace balcony, watching the sun sink into the red earth. The wind moved gently through her hair. Below her, the village lived freely at last. She had been broken and rebuilt. She had been shamed and restored. And in her quiet strength, Ioto found its healing. Thus ended the story of the silent heads, and began the legacy of a queen who proved that truth always grows back.